Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan from the Leather Elves, and I'm here with Jack Pine from High Redbird. How's it going, Jack?
I am doing all right. How are you doing, Robin?
Okay, so I didn't melt. I'm in Arizona. So
Okay.
I'm speaking to you from Arizona. It just feels kind of weird. But it was, like 114 degrees in my car. But I'm okay. We got some AC going on here, and I'm excited to be talking to you and seeing everybody else. So, bad day or good day? How was your day?
It was a really good day. I'm always so excited when we get to do these flock talks. Friday is generally just a good day for me because I have something so fun to look forward to. And I think the topic that we're covering tonight is a great topic that I think a lot of people understand better than they think they do. But diving into this one, I'm excited for it.
I absolutely agree with you. This is so if you look at the title of tonight, the understanding the quadrant, it just sounds like math, which is terrifying for me anyway. So, but I think you're right. I think people do really understand it. It's just a matter of putting it in those terms. So, do we have any announcements tonight, Jack?
So we usually have announcements for you guys. We want to start by reminding you to like the Leather Elves page on Facebook. You'll get all sorts of notifications. We let you know what the live streams are going to be in advance, so you can know what the topics are. You get notifications on fun things like sales that the Leather Elves have going on. And of course, if your settings are set up appropriately, if you like the Leather Elves on Facebook, you will get a notification every time we start a live stream. Now, we start these live streams every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is really fun because neither me nor Robin nor Nick are currently in the Eastern time zone, but that's still how we keep track of time. So definitely make sure you do that. Now, even with all of that, with those notifications, it can be a little bit difficult some days to keep track of everything. So if you guys subscribe to the High Redbird YouTube channel, every live stream we have done is part of a playlist. So you can watch them all start to finish. Maybe if you guys are planning an epic road trip, you would have the opportunity to go through any of the sessions you might have missed. And speaking of opportunities for epic road trips, don't forget we are coming up right at the very last minute to register for the AFA, the American Federation of Aviculture Conference. That is going to be August. I know this. We're going to pretend I'm not looking at my notes. August 12th through the 14th. What's 10?
I thought it was the 10th. Sorry, it's the
Ah!
12th. You're right.
Okay, then I'm
I
going
was
to
just
say,
waving. I wasn't. Yeah, I was just waving.
well, in that case, I am glad I checked my notes. But it is going to be August 12th through the 14th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So if you guys are not in Minneapolis, you guys have listening material for your drive up to Minneapolis. If you do live in Minneapolis, just go ahead and drive around the city listening to the playlist. You'll get the same experience. It'll be great. Um, Robin and I will both be doing sessions at the American Federation of Aviculture Conference individually. We'll also be doing a workshop session together. And that will be our first opportunity to have a live and in person live stream. So if you guys want to meet us, ask us questions, things like that, it'll be a great opportunity for that. And of course, the last one, we always want to remind you guys you can follow both the Leather Elves and High Redbird on Instagram. We post a ton of fun content over there. It's one more place where we let you guys know what the live stream topics are going to be so you can get all of that information. We always strive to make this information as readily available as possible. Janice wanted to correct me. It's technically in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. And if people are driving and you go for the general direction of Minneapolis, you're going to get pretty close.
And if you
So I'm
arrive in
standing by
Bloomington,
it.
and if you arrive in Bloomington on the 10th, or Minneapolis
You,
on the 10th, you have plenty of time to get to Bloomington by the 12th. I'm just saying. So, all right. So I think we've covered that. So now it's time to kind of dive into this, understanding the quadrants of operant conditioning. Again, it sounds look serious. With Jack, do you have your smart glasses?
I do. Hold on.
Nice, very nice. I don't have mine, so I don't need
I
them.
do this too. I need it.
Ooh,
I've been
I
practicing.
just I just exude that smartness. I don't need the smart glasses. So anyway,
Does he have a phone booth to turn into Superbird?
Nick wants to know if you have a phone booth to turn into Superbird. Oh,
I didn't
see.
practice that.
So did we forget to tell you that Nick and I happen to be in the same location? So it might get a little snarky. Just saying. Anyway, so we're going to talk about this scary topic, and it's not so scary. And hopefully by the end of tonight's Flock Talk, you guys will understand. I think you already understand, but it'll make more sense in those terms that people use, that people get hung up on. So the first thing we want to talk about is, what is a reinforcer? I know we've talked about this before, and I know all of you use reinforcement. I really believe that. So the first question we have is the difference between a primary and a secondary reinforcer. So Jack, primary reinforcer, go.
So the easiest way for me to remember this, a primary reinforcer is something your animal needs. It's going to be, it's a lot more important. It's not just something it wants, it's something it needs. And there's
So
a
it's,
couple of things that fall in that category. But okay, you have
I,
a bet. I'm ready for your
well, no.
definition.
Are you ready? Okay. It's pretty brilliant. It's essential.
Oh, you took my like
Oh,
4-word definition and broke it down to 2.
it's essential. So bottom line, primary is something that they can't live without. That's super essential to their continued existence. Things like water, food, air. Air is kind of a sex. That's not funny, Jack. That's serious stuff.
Oh.
Happens when I end up in this time
So
zone.
yes, food is a great primary reinforcer. Yeah.
Cookie butter. Cookie butter is a primary reinforcer. Just ask Diane. Yeah.
Right. And so for a lot of people, I think it can get confused with secondary reinforcement, which is not necessarily something your animal needs, but it's something they might like. So head scratches, socialization, being near you, those are going to be things that typically fall more in the secondary reinforcement category. Yes.
Toys.
Toys are a great
You know, and I think we some people will discount the secondaries, and sometimes the secondaries can be almost more powerful because it's something that the animal desires, but probably pork chops. No, Karen, pork chops are not a primary. Well, they are a primary reinforcer, but maybe they're Karen's primary reinforcer. So, Karen, when we come to Bloomington, not Minneapolis, we will see if pork chops are Karen's primary reinforcer. So
well,
that's the.
And the other thing about a secondary reinforcer, while it is something that your animal likes, it is typically not something that has value on its own to start with. It's usually because you've paired it with a primary reinforcer that you have been working with and you've built a great relationship with it. Head scratches are a secondary reinforcer. If you have a bird that you don't know and doesn't really like you, head scratches are not going to have that same impact on that animal. Rather, that animal might have an impact on you. So, primary, secondary, I would say you can use both for training. I mean, what do you think, Robin?
I definitely agree, and I think don't get bogged down in what is which is higher value. Which it's again we talk about. Okay, so tonight, I have to say, we're going to talk a lot about that study of one. And with the reinforcers, it's definitely a study of one. Something that's a primary reinforcer may be much more valuable than a secondary to a certain bird. But another bird might be, I'll do anything for head scratches. I mean, I've worked with birds like that before, and I'm sure you have as well. Or some birds that will work for socialization. So I think it's really, again, about kind of taking the time, figuring out what your reinforcer is, and don't get bogged down in primary versus secondary. So
yeah, I think it's important to know the definitions, but yeah, you don't have to get hung up on them.
No, I mean, Ray says pine nuts. Karen says pork chops. I mean, pine nuts are super reinforcing for a lot of birds, but I have worked with birds that will turn their beaks, that will turn their beaks up. And it's, so it really depends. So I've talked a lot with a lot of people that I'm working with doing consulting lately about how to choose that reinforcer. And it's not a magical secret to figure out what the reinforcer is, but it takes a little bit of work. So Jack, I know you do the same thing that I do as far as how to find a reinforcer. You want to let people know what that is?
So I typically like to prepare a plate of things that I'm willing to give my bird. Things that, maybe I'll do some sliced pieces of apple, some peas, some carrots, some corn, some shelled almonds. And I'm going to look to see, when presented with all of these things at once, what my animal is going to go for first, what their enthusiasm level is for interacting with certain items. And I'm going to definitely have to take a couple of things into account there. Sometimes I like to save the biggest, highest value reinforcer that animal has chosen for very special training sessions. If there's a medical need, that's a great option for that. And another thing that I like to do that I think could help a lot of people, when I do this with an animal, I will keep notes. I'll say, what did they go for first? And what items were they up against? Because there's no way you're going to present your animal every possible food item it can ever get at once at the same time. And I feel like a lot of times with our birds, they can be a little bit like toddlers, where for 3 weeks, oh yeah, that animal worked great for corn. It loved corn. It loves corn. You get to week 4. I hate corn. What is this? I've never liked it in my life. Why did you give this to me? Throws it on the floor. Robin, what do you think?
Well, and I think too, it's a matter of when you're trying to figure this out, it's not, pellets and pine nuts as a choice. Because, yeah, come on, they're probably going to choose those pine nuts, unless you're Zorro, because Melissa says Zorro doesn't like pine nuts. So you really have to look at, and I always tell people what they go for first, but you've got to notice that what they go for first and don't throw on the floor, because that happens too. It's the, nope, don't want this. Nope, don't want this. Ooh, this is what I want. And so it's those observation skills, again, that we talk about all the time. Making some great notes on what they pick and how the order they pick them in. And at the same time, don't completely decide, oh, well, because he didn't go for that first, that's never going to work. Just keep it in mind. Okay, that's what he went for second. So maybe if I don't have blueberries or, that number 1 choice, I've got number 2. I've got number 3. And you go down that way.
Right. And I would say it also works, kind of the other way when you're getting ready for a training session and there's an item that, yeah, blueberries. Blueberries are the last thing my bird picks every single time. If I know that I need to do a training session with a bird in an environment that's slightly stressful or a brand new behavior or something that's a little bit different than what they are used to, I'm not going to pick blueberries as my reinforcer because that's not setting me up for success.
No, definitely not. So that's we wanted to talk about reinforcers and how you pick them, what the definitions are. And I think the other thing we wanted to talk about before we really jump into the topic for tonight is timing. So timing is critical in pretty much everything we talk about, any kind of training. And it's going to affect all of the quadrants of operant conditioning. So Jack, timing, what do you think?
I think, like you said, timing is so incredibly important. And we usually talk about timing with regard to positive reinforcement. We're going to get into all of them, but that is the form of operant conditioning I feel most people are most comfortable with. And we talk about the timing with that. The timing for any of the other types of training is going to be just as important. And I think a lot of people have concerns about how they can improve their timing, especially for new trainers. It can be a little bit difficult. So I've always recommended, we've recommended together, I've heard you recommend it individually. If you record your training sessions, you have the opportunity to watch them back. You can see how you are interacting with that animal. Are you going too fast and your animal can't keep up? Are you going too slow? Your animal's ready to move on and you're not reinforcing it for the behaviors that you want. Record those training sessions, or if you have someone else in your household who works with that bird, having them watch your training sessions. Both of those are going to be great ways to just assess your timing.
Right. I really like the video approach because sometimes it can get a little judgy when, you've got two trainers in the house. Oh, well, no, my way works. Oh, well, I was doing it this way. Oh, I noticed you didn't do that. So really, it's just something to be careful of. And if you can record it, because that way you can watch it over and over again, because you may not catch that thing that happened in the first viewing. So you maybe have to watch it 2 or 3 times. But I think, again, timing is so important. But there's no definition to time, what's good timing. But the topic we've got tonight is really about definitions. And I want to ask people to put what you've learned in the past aside for right now, because the terms that we're going to talk about tonight don't necessarily have the same connotation that you have been taught your whole life. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to start right now. What time? We're going to start at this moment. And this is how we're going to view these terms, because they definitely are some pretty powerful terms and people can have a really hard time with them, particularly punishment. And we'll talk about that. But it's definitely something that takes you got to take that step back and go, okay, I got my trainer hat on. This is what I'm referring to. So, do you agree, Jack? Have you run up against that before?
Yeah, I think for a lot of new trainers, it can be very difficult because if you are just used to the typical connotation of things like negative and punishment, they sound really, really bad. They sound like, no, I wouldn't want to use that because I want to provide my bird the best possible life. And I think it's important for people to recognize that every aspect of animal training is geared towards giving your animal more choice in its environment, bettering its life. As you use those different areas of training appropriately, none of them are bad. None of them are a horrible thing you shouldn't be using, but understanding where they come from, and even more importantly, understanding how they can all flow into each other. Because for me, the most successful trainers I have seen don't stick in one quadrant. You watch a really good trainer and you watch them shift effortlessly from one to the other to the next. What do you think, Robin? Have you seen that?
Absolutely. And I think it becomes so seamless that if you were a novice watching someone, you really wouldn't be able to pinpoint, oh, that's this type, that's in this quadrant, that's in this quadrant. And that's the way it should flow. I think everybody kind of aspires to that, but don't beat yourself up if you're in one quadrant and that works best for you right now. Just know that they're all available to you. And, hopefully at some point in your training career or your training experience, you will be able to kind of move that seamlessly through from one to the other. But that takes some time, but we can, talk about that too. And there are some examples that we've got tonight that I know they do flow back and forth, and it's up for a little bit of discussion. So this is where the math comes in. It's the math, I know. But in this case, oh, you've got the glasses on. Okay. So positive Jack, positive. What is the definition of positive?
So positive, it's a.
No. Okay, fine. I
Positive is when you add anything to the environment to have an impact on behavior. That's it. It's positive. You add something. That's really all
that's
there is
all.
to it. Yes. So on the flip
That's
side, negative, which sounds scary, negative is when you take something away to impact behavior.
so it's a plus or a minus.
Yeah.
Super easy. But I know there are people out there going negative. It's bad. I don't ever want to be negative with my animal. I don't want to do that. And that's a reaction that you get so many times when you're working with a novice trainer or someone who's not familiar with the terminology, and you say, okay, so we're going to try some negative whatever. No. I need to be positive. But it's really not about what we've always felt was negative.
Well, and it's kind of like the law of conservation of energy. You can't create energy. So I think when you're taking care of an animal, you want to think that you're only doing these positive things. You're only focusing on what you're giving your animal, and you ignore what you're taking away. So a great example is food. I'm sure there are a lot of people that think about, I have prepped this animal an incredible diet. I'm going to give this animal the diet first thing in the morning. This is positive. I added something to its environment. They don't think about when, oh, well, the bowl was partially empty and I took the bowl out at the end of the day to clean it. But you took something out of the environment at that time. So for your positives, you're going to have negatives. They are going to exist. There is no way around them, and they're not a bad thing.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you just need to be aware of which side that falls on. Is it taking something away or is it adding something? I mean, it's pretty basic. And the other thing is knowing your animal. So I feel like there's this tape that runs when we do that. I think Nick has it actually. He just punches the button and the same things come out of our mouths every single week. But it depends on the animal. That positive adding something to the environment may work for, a whole bunch of animals. Taking something away may work for a whole bunch of animals, but it's going to take you determining what works for your guys at home or in the facility that you work at to know which is more effective. I'm sure, Jack, I know you've worked with different animals that respond very differently to positive versus negative.
Right. And you're going to see it with different animals of the same species. They're going to have different individual preferences. You're going to see it with different animals that have just different overall temperaments. The way that you approach, the way that you add things, the way that you take things away, it really it depends. And I know for some people that can be a little frustrating because it's not, okay, here's answer on a silver platter. It is, you have to observe your animal and you have to pick what is working best for them. And it is incredibly subjective.
Yeah.
And what were you going to say, Robin?
I like to think of it as kind of a blueprint as long as you have the eraser for that blueprint, right? So whatever you use to draw your blueprint, to sketch it out, this is the way I'm going to go. You got to have that eraser because it may not work. Flow with that and know that, okay, maybe this animal responds to positive, this animal responds to negative, and be willing to adapt. Okay. So I think that's part of it.
A bit of an internet burp.
Oh,
there. So they missed the beginning of that.
Okay. All right. So it's so nice having Nick actually here. He can tell me what's going on. So what I was saying was it's really about to erase part of it. That if you've got to change it, you've got to move a little bit. You've got to be able to go with that. It's animal training is incredibly fluid. And I think knowing and observing and watching which works best is the way to go. So, all right. So we've got positive and negative down.
Oh, yes? So now we're going to get to the big ones.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Okay.
Okay.
So we need to talk about,
Yes.
yes. So we're going to talk about reinforcement and punishment, correct?
Yes, we.
Well, reinforcement, I think most people know, reinforcement is a training technique that increases the likelihood that a particular behavior will happen again.
That just sounds wonderful. It's
Yeah.
that's so happy, and it's a good thing, and it's reinforcement.
So, punishment. Punishment is a training technique that decreases the likelihood that a particular behavior will occur again.
That sounds pretty okay too.
It doesn't. Uh, the typical connotation is that I'm being mean to my animal. They are in trouble, and that's not what punishment means in terms of animal training. It's just decreasing particular behaviors.
Right. So, you know, when you say, "Oh, I punished my animal," "Oh, I used punishment," be sure that when you say that, that's actually what's happening, because it may be that you want a behavior to increase. You want to see that the likelihood that that behavior is going to occur again to increase, but you took something away. So I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say that's punishment because you took something away. But as we get further into examples and we talk about the quadrants, it's not, because you're still asking for the likelihood to increase, the likelihood that it'll happen again. So that's something you guys all have to promise, Jack and I, that you won't look at punishment as a bad thing again. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people to recognize that sometimes you need certain behaviors to decrease. Let's remember that everything your animal does is a behavior. And not all of those behaviors are going to be things that you want your animal doing. Screaming at you at all hours of the day, that's a behavior that most people would want to decrease. If your bird flies at you, if it bites at you, all of those things are behaviors you would probably want to decrease.
Right, absolutely. And I think Julie brings up a good point. You might have taken something away to ensure success. So that's a really good way to look at it. And you'll see, Julie, when we get to the examples, that's one of the things that Jack and I have discussed quite a bit, is that it may just be that you knew this was going to increase the likelihood of a behavior occurring. So that's reinforcement. But if you take something away, it's negative. You have to it reminds me of diagramming sentences. So you've got to and I think we talked about this one other night, that somebody really liked diagramming sentences. Or maybe it was on Facebook, but it's kind of cool because you can break it down that way and see how it really works. But it also depends on the animal, whether it's positive, negative, reinforcement, or punishment. For different animals, that works different ways. Have you seen that happen, Jack?
Yeah, I think a great example, which I think we'll be using later on as well, but to see the subjective nature of it. A lot of people, if they are training their cat, they'll use like a Mr. bottle or a spray bottle as a pretty strong aversive. So if you use that, that is a form of punishment. Your cat's not going to want that. That's something to try to avoid at all costs. I have cockatoos that when they see the Mr. bottle, they know they're going to get a bath. It is the most exciting time in the world. They are very, very eager for that. So that same item, that Mr. bottle, is punishment for one animal and reinforcement for another. So you have to make your decisions based on your individual animal.
It really makes a big difference. So we need to talk about the fact, I think, that all of the quadrants are valid. All of them can be part of your training toolbox. It's not, you don't want to rely on one more heavily than another. I think we do tend to, the go-to for many, many, many years has been positive reinforcement. And I think part of the reason for that is there's a smaller likelihood that you're going to inadvertently train an undesirable behavior when you use positive reinforcement. I mean, do you agree with that, Jack?
Yeah, I think well, one, aside from the obvious, I think a lot of people like using positive reinforcement because positive is good and reinforcement is good. So when we put them together, it's really good. And so they're excited about that. I think, positive reinforcement has great potential to not only train behaviors, but build a relationship with your animal, because then, you are the provider of treats, of things that your animal likes for doing the things that it's already doing. So positive reinforcement, I think, is great.
So Diane's asking, is that a positive punisher?
I'm guessing about the water bottle.
Right. So, all right, that's a really good question. So positive is adding something to the environment. So it is positive. We'll use that word. We'll hold on to that. And then punisher, it depends. It depends on if the bird thinks it's like the best thing ever, like Jack's cockatoos, then it's a reinforcer. They're probably more like, so if Jack wanted to get them to come to the front of the cage or the front of an exhibit, and he pulled out the mister and they come, flying over or running over, which is so darn cute when cockatoos do that. And then it would be positive reinforcement because it's increasing the likelihood that they're going to come to the front of the exhibit. Okay. If it's still positive because you're adding something to the environment, but if you want them to come to, or you don't want them right at the front. So you're trying to decrease the likelihood that they come to the front, and they don't enjoy the spray bottle and they move to the back. So you are decreasing the likelihood that they will come to the front. And that just feels like such a long explanation, but that's how it breaks down. So in that case, Diane, then it's positive punishment.
Yeah, and so we're going to go through this as we go through every quadrant, but I'll tell you guys right now, I pretty much always have to break it down in terms of, first, is it positive or negative? Am I adding something or taking it away? Second, is it reinforcement or is it punishment? I don't combine all of those questions to land on my quadrant. I break them down in half. So if it's positive, we're on this side. If it's negative, we're on this side. And then if it's a reinforcer, it's the top half. If it's a punishment, it's the bottom half. So you can see why we refer to it as the quadrants, because you end up with 4 spaces with positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, negative punishment.
Right. And, I noticed in the comments, Melissa says that Zorro punishes her. I got to tell you, Melissa, our guys don't punish us. They make, if you feel bad about putting them back in the cage, that's you feeling bad. So we don't want to anthropomorphize. We want to make sure that, we're looking at these terms. We're going to forget that whole idea about punishment, Melissa, being a bad thing. It's going to be something that is possible for you to use as a tool. So we really want to, we're going to forget about the whole, oh, I got punished, or, when I was a kid, I used to get punished and sent to bed with no supper. No, that's not the kind of punishment we're talking about. So you've got to see how it's affecting your animal too. It goes back to that observation piece. I mean, Jack, don't you think that it's all about observation?
Yeah. Interacting.
Okay. And I absolutely get that. I know, Melissa. And we sometimes say those things. All right. So We were frozen and we're back, I believe. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Jack, let's start breaking it down into positive reinforcement. Let's talk about positive reinforcement first.
I think that's where we need to start, because I think positive reinforcement is the training technique most people are going to be adding something to the environment that increases the likelihood that a behavior is going to happen. So, a standard training session where you cue a
Okay.
behavior and your animal does the behavior, and then you reinforce it. That's going to be a great example of positive reinforcement.
Right. And I think that's the one we are the most familiar with. And it's also the one, in my opinion, that we can sometimes inadvertently reinforce unwanted behavior. So that's where, when we were talking about timing in the very beginning, sometimes that happens when, your bridge is a little bit off and your bird screams and then he's quiet and you're just about ready to bridge and he screams again and you bridge. So now I have positively reinforced, I've added something to the environment that increased the likelihood that he was going to scream again. So you've just got to be careful, especially positive reinforcement, most of all, in my opinion, requires that almost perfect timing.
Right. And I know we have talked about positive reinforcement is a great way to interact with your bird that has uh, the lowest possible likelihood of those negative behaviors, those problematic behaviors, or at least the things that we view as problematic.
Right.
But like, even outside of a training session like that, I feel like most people utilize positive reinforcement and training with their animals without even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times have we heard of a bird that lives in a home with multiple people? It has a person that primarily works with it, and then there's other people in the home that, oh, the bird started screaming, so I threw a few nuts into the bowl. Well, the bird did a behavior, and you added something that is then going to increase the likelihood that bird will do that behavior again, because it screams and you bring it nuts. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you didn't mean to, you just used positive reinforcement to train your bird to yell at all times.
Right. And I mean, it happens. Okay. So anybody that's spent any time with toddlers and they do something that's really not appropriate and you giggle because it's funny. And then they're like, oh, they laughed at me. I'll do it again. I got that attention. I'll do it again. And so that's how sometimes, that person that's not the trainer in the house, that person that's not used to using that reinforcement will come forward and just reinforce a behavior. And you're like, what are you doing? So that's another thing we probably should talk about is, if you've got multiple trainers in the house, you need to make sure, or multiple people, not just trainers, but people, they're all trainers in the end, and you've got to make sure everybody's using the same, not necessarily, they don't have to use the same method, but they all have to be on the same page as to what's getting either reinforced or you're using punishment for, either way. So,
Yeah, I think
all right.
that's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. So positive reinforcement, this corner, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. So this is something when you take something out of the environment to you take something out to increase the likelihood that that behavior will occur again. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, hold on. So there can be negative reinforcement. It's not, it's not a bad thing. It's something that you can use. And my favorite example of this is one that you kind of just do and you don't even think about when you're working with horses. And if you have the reins on a horse, so you pull the reins, you want the horse to go to the right, you pull the reins to the right, they start to turn that way. You remove that. So you take something away, so it's negative, and taking that away increases the likelihood that that behavior will happen again.
Well, and for me, again, just talking about horses, for the longest time, there's been those shows of the horse whisperer, the other whisperer. Most of those shows are going to utilize that same training technique, where it's not, you know, a psychic connection to the animal, but it's observation. It's reading that animal's body language, recognizing that for most horses, I've utilized this with parrots when they are scared of me. If they are not used to interacting with me going away can be a very reinforcing thing. So what I can do is I can go up to an animal to a certain point, have a distance between us, as it stays calm, as it exhibits that normal, plain, just calm behavior. I want to reinforce that. Best way that I can do that is to remove myself from the situation. And then the next time that I want to try that exchange, I should be able to get that close, and that animal will be comfortable with it. And maybe I can get one step closer. And if the animal stays calm, I stay there, I wait, and then I remove myself from the situation. And eventually, I will have built it to the point that I am right next to that animal. And I feel like growing up, we all saw those shows where it's, you know, this magical communication with animals. And, you know, I've talked about this. I do view animal training as a way to communicate with animals, but it's not magic. It's observation. It's reading their body language. They are telling you things all the time, and you just need to react accordingly.
Definitely. You know, Julie says, look away and approach indirectly. We've talked before about how they are a prey species, and sometimes approaching from the front. This is, you know, and Hilla talked about it at the conference, it can be taken as a very aggressive type of posture or approach. And I think, you know, the walking away, that taking that step back, we're offering them a little bit of control, because what that says to them is that we are listening to what they're telling us. We're watching their body language. We're, you know, reading what's going on. And by stopping or taking that step back and, you know, have its negative reinforcement, we are definitely giving that animal the signal that we're paying attention. So that's something that I think is super positive. Wait, I shouldn't use that word.
No. You can, because I would say that that's how that flows into that level of training. So if I have a bird that is skittish, that doesn't want me to be more than 20 feet away or 20 feet closer to it, it's really hard for me to give that bird a pine nut from 20 feet away. But I can utilize that negative reinforcement to build that animal's confidence with me to where I can get closer to it. Once that animal is comfortable with me being 2 feet away, I can then shift into positive reinforcement using food items, using things that animal likes. So you can see already how we're shifting from one to the other, and they really do lend themselves to that.
They often work hand in hand, and you may not even feel that it's happening, and it just, suddenly you find yourself in a different quadrant, and it doesn't make any difference what quadrant you're in, as long as you're still using your correct timing. You're still either reinforcing or punishing, taking, depending on where you want to be or what's happening. But you just need to know, okay, this is working. And you need to assess and observe your training and say, is this an effective way to do it? And maybe you need to take a step back or look at, okay, this, positive reinforcement's not working. Negative reinforcement isn't working. Where do I go from here? And there's no hierarchy as far as how you approach the quadrants. It's just really what works for a particular animal. So don't, it's not, I got to try this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. It doesn't really go that way. So.
Yeah, they all flow together.
So the next one is probably the most difficult for people to handle. This is the one that people go, oh, no. It's positive punishment. So positive punishment is adding something to the environment to decrease the likelihood that a behavior will occur. So again, we default to that punishment place, and punishment's a bad thing, but it's not in, in this case. So I think the reins on a horse can go back and forth between negative reinforcement and positive punishment. So if I apply that pressure, that's positive punishment. Okay. Because we don't want the horse turning the way it was going. So you apply the pressure, you're decreasing the likelihood they're going to go that way. When you ease up on that pressure, which is negative, you're taking something away, it's negative reinforcement because you're increasing the likelihood that they'll go in a certain direction. Does that make sense?
Right. And I think that's really important. That one, that's a behavior that it naturally flows from one to the other. And it's incredibly subjective depending on how you're thinking about it, because some people might just see it as positive punishment. You added that pressure on the reins to take away the likelihood. If your horse is starting to go to the right and you need it to go left, you add that pressure on the reins so that it doesn't go right. So it's positive punishment. But when that release happens, you get that other area of training as well, negative reinforcement, because now the horse is doing a different behavior. It's on path with where you want it. You want to reinforce that behavior, and you take away that pressure. So, yeah, it's incredibly subjective. They do flow together.
Mm-hmm. And it changes. It can change in a moment from one to the other. And that's okay. And again, that's where you see your best trainers, is when they can flow that evenly from one to another. So the other one we talked about, the water bottle, is another example, like we said, of positive punishment. It can be, and it doesn't have to be, but so getting caught up in those terms can be a little bit dangerous, because you trip over, oh wait, what am I doing? Is this pot? Do what works. Do what you're getting results, as long as it's not, hurting the bird in any way, offering the bird some control over its environment so that it's making choices. It doesn't really matter where you end up, and don't trip over the terms. So Jack, the last one,
Mm-hmm.
did you have more to add to the, terminology, or?
Yeah, I think as people, not tripping up over the terminology, not getting stuck on it. But as you mentioned, as long as what you're doing is not hurting the bird. And I just want us to touch on that for a second, because we don't just mean physically. And I know for a lot of people that's what that can seem like. It's like, oh, well, I didn't, I didn't beat my bird, so I'm obviously not having that negative impact on it. Again, if you guys record your training sessions, you'll be able to see this. But if you are taking away an excessive amount of choice to the point that your bird is overly stressed, it's fearful, I would still say that is problematic, and that would be something to avoid as well. So try to think about the overall wellness of your bird when you're doing your training. It's physical well-being, but it's mental and emotional well-being as well. Try to keep all those in mind. And I know most of the people that are watching tonight, they're going to be doing that anyways. That's why they watch things like this, because they want to know more ways that they can better provide for the overall well-being of their bird. But it was just something that I'm like, I got an asterisk.
It's definitely true. Demi talks about the communication here, that on the 4th of July, her gray let her do the usual head scratching to say goodnight, and added a little nip at the end. The bird was communicating with her and letting her know where it was at that point in time. And I think that's, again, Demi, you're absolutely right. We need to listen to how they're communicating with us. And the more choice you can offer, the more control, I think you're going to see much better results. Because we've talked about this with COVID. A lot of us lost a lot of our choices and a lot of our control over situations. And I know I personally didn't like it much. And I know a lot of you didn't. And so think about how that lack of control, when there's that lack of control, there's that lack of choice. There wasn't a lot of choice as to where you could go, where you should go. And we've got to consider that when we're working on training. What kind of choices can we offer? What kind of control can we offer? And how do we empower these birds? We've talked about being bird centric. And I think this is one of those critical pieces that regardless of which quadrant you end up in, that it remains bird centric. It remains empowering for the animals that share our lives with us. I just think that's so important. So there's one more. We've got one more to discuss. Unless you're good with positive punishment, Jack?
Yeah.
We covered that? Okay. Negative punishment. So, Mr. Where's your smart glasses? Let's see those.
I think they're turning into incredible shrinking glasses.
Incredible shrinking glasses. Oh, there you go.
They keep
Yes.
getting smaller. Oh.
There you are. You need to be, right up there in front with those glasses. We need to see how smart you are. Look at that. So Jack, can you tell us about negative punishment?
So negative punishment, it is negative. So we are taking away something from the environment. It is punishment. So we are aiming to decrease the likelihood of a behavior reoccurring.
Okay. So this goes back to Julie's comment at the beginning, in my opinion, when she said, you might take something away to set an animal up for success. So when Jack and I were preparing for this, we were talking about, is antecedent arrangement actually negative punishment? I don't know. What do you think, Jack?
So Robin,
Yes.
before we get into that, so as people offer their insight, do you want to break down what is antecedent arrangement?
So antecedent arrangement, so we've got the ABCs. A lot of times when you're talking to trainers, they're like, oh, we got to figure out what the ABCs were. Yeah, there you go, ABCs. And actually what that stands for is antecedent behavior consequence. I need the smart glasses now. But again, I don't even need them. So antecedent is what comes before a behavior. Whatever it is that's there before. Then there's the behavior itself, whatever that may be. And then there's the consequence. And that's another one of those terms that people get all kind of uptight about. Oh, there's a consequence. No, it doesn't mean, all it means is what comes after, what happened after the behavior. There is no negative connotation to consequence, but we do sometimes trip over that one too.
And consequences are, it's just what happens after a thing. If I work 2 weeks, I get a paycheck. My paycheck is my consequence for that behavior of going to work. And while it doesn't, that's not the word that most people would choose. They wouldn't say, oh yeah, my paycheck is a consequence. In animal training talk, that's exactly what it is. You went to work, you got a paycheck. You did the effort of making dinner, you now have dinner. A plate of dinner is your consequence of that work. So consequences can be, things that we think of as beneficial, good things. But it's just understanding that layout of what happens before a behavior, the behavior, what happens after the behavior.
Right. So the antecedent is what comes before. And antecedent arrangement is when, if you know that this particular animal does not work well in a setting that has red in it, for whatever reason. For years we were told that bulls didn't like red, right? That it made them angry. Who knows? We don't know exactly where that came from. But you have to take a look at that. Okay, so if I'm going to train this animal and I know that it doesn't work well if there's red in the room, I'm going to move things around. I'm going to take them away so that they're not there affecting this training session. So that, in essence, is negative punishment. I'm taking something away to decrease the likelihood that a behavior will be repeated. So if I have an animal that gets, violent or, has an aggressive posture when I have red in the room, I'm going to take it away, decrease that likelihood. Have you ever done antecedent? I think antecedent arrangement is a great tool.
So for me, one of the main things that happens with a lot of the birds, if I'm training them for show behaviors, if I'm training them to do presentations, distraction is a big thing that happens with my birds. So I try to eliminate sources of distraction. So if I go through the environment, if I know where I'm going to be training and remove as many sources of distraction as possible, that is going to be a negative punishment for the distracted behavior. I am taking things away from the environment to limit the chance that the bird will be distracted. It is negative reinforcement for those behaviors that I'm going to cue, because I'm taking things away from the environment to increase the likelihood that the bird does its cued behaviors. So you guys can see in the exact same situation, we're changing what quadrant we're in just based on what behavior.
All right. I was going to say last night we were doing some filming of animals and of birds. And
Last night you did what?
last night we did some filming of birds. We were doing some fun stuff, and we used all 4 quadrants. We used antecedent arrangement. We used all different kinds of things. So all of those tools were in my toolbox, and it was easy for us to move from one to the other and get. But you got to set it up right. So I think we've got. I mean, this is an awful lot of information, but it's not something that should become overwhelming. Yeah, it is too hot but it's air conditioning here, Lori. I can't really use that as an excuse. And Jack had it was really hot for a long time in Texas, and I made fun of him with the whole I'm in New Hampshire thing. So I don't know. I probably, it's payback, but it's okay. So Jack, do you have any, words of wisdom as far as the quadrants are concerned?
I think it's really important to recognize that utilizing different approaches, thinking about how you are applying those different approaches to your animals, is going to make you a better animal trainer. If you're paying attention to how your animal is reacting to you, how you are adding or taking away things from the environment, and the impact that is having on your animal's behavior, you are observing your animal. You are paying attention to their overall needs, their overall wellness. That's going to make you a better animal trainer, a better animal caretaker, and quite frankly, a better person. That understanding of how your actions and the things you do in an environment have an impact on the things around you. It's a critically important skill to build. And as you understand all of the different quadrants, you're going to be a better animal trainer.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think, part of that is as you grow in your training abilities, there are a lot of times when you'll figure out that using multiple approaches will work with the same animal. So you don't need to always get stuck in the same, oh, I'm going to do this all the time with this animal because that's what works. You can see that there are definitely different things that you can try and that may work, and give them a shot. And if you see that there's an adverse response, that you don't get the response you're looking for, okay, move on to something else and try a different approach. So let's see, anything else, Jack, or are we ready for a trivia question?
I think that we should be ready for a trivia question.
All right. And as always, we're leaving Nick in charge of this. I can take bribes though, because I'm actually physically with him this week. But no, I won't. Absolutely not. That would never happen here on Flock Talk ever. So, all right. The trivia question for this week is and we're going to be really specific about this. What is punishment? And the answer is not a bad thing. Just saying. But so
No,
I would
say
yes.
I would say the answer is a good thing, because if you get the trivia question right because you know the answer, you get a prize.
true. That is true. Hmm. So, do we have? I'm wondering. Do we have a an answer, Nick, or are we still waiting? All right. So, Adrian, anything that reduces the possibility of a behavior occurring. All right. So, Adrian, I know that you are going to be at AFA in Minneapolis, in Bloomington. Bloomington. Okay. If you're at AFA in Minneapolis, then you're in the wrong place. So don't go there. If you're in Bloomington, Adrian, I will bring you a Leather Elves toy as your prize for that trivia question. Good answer. It's anything that reduces the possibility of occurring. All right.
Well, and then I think one last time, just so anyone who tuned in late, if they didn't get it, I would just want to go over those definitions of those 4 things one more time, if you are okay with that, Robin.
I am absolutely fine with that. Oh, the
All
smart
right.
glasses. Would you like to
Yes.
take one? Would you like to start, Dr. Jack?
So positive is when you add something to the environment.
Negative is when you remove something from the environment.
And those 2 terms can be paired with these 2 terms. Reinforcement is, and I want to make sure I get the exact wording. Reinforcement is a training technique that increases the likelihood that a behavior will occur again.
And punishment is a training technique that decreases the likelihood that a behavior will occur again. And that's
See,
it.
your definitions were easier because you just had to change one word each time.
You got the smart glasses. Come on. I mean, really? Use them, will you? But, I mean, this is kind of a tough topic. Megan says she always wears smart glasses. You don't even need them, Megan. You're awesome. There's no need for those smart glasses unless they help you see, and then they're pretty important. So we want to thank you guys for being with us and for putting up. I know the internet was a little tricky, and Nick, like, it's even more impressive to do this with Nick in the room because I get to see like all the magical things that he does, and I appreciate that even more. So thank you again, Nick, and thanks, Jack, for getting those smart glasses, and we tackled another tough topic. So we just wanted to remind you, we will be at AFA August 12th through the 14th in that city, Bloomington, Minnesota. And we know that Lori McFarland's going to be there. We know that a lot of you are going to be joining. Megan's going to be there, I believe. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to, we'll be around. We'll be there to talk to if you guys have questions, anything. We're going to be at AFA, and it's going to be a great event. And Jack, do you have anything else you want to add?
We do just want to remind you guys, we do these live streams every single Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're always very excited to do these for you guys. We encourage you guys to watch them live because then you can participate and be a part of the conversation. So if you like the Leather Elves page on Facebook, you'll be able to participate with those sessions there. You can, of course, subscribe to the High Redbird YouTube channel. Watch all of the discussions that we have had. They are all part of a single playlist in addition to all the other videos that I do. So if you go there, you're never going to miss out on any of our Flock Talks. And again, thank you guys all so much.
And just one last thing. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. It's a lot of fun to do these. And, we joke about, Karen says Bloomington is a second ring suburb. Is that like the Lord of the Rings? I don't know. I'm going to go with that now. All right. So we love coming up with topics. We actually could use your help sometimes to come up with those topics. But we are going to next week, we are going to talk about what happens when regression occurs. Because it does.
Yeah, no matter how experienced, how good an animal trainer you are, regression is always going to be something that you have to work through, you have to grow from. So we're really excited to tackle this topic.
All right. So I think we're all set. I want to thank Nick again for all the magic that he makes happen. And thank you, Jack. It's always fun working with you. And thank you all for tuning in. So we will see you guys next week. And I'll be back in the cold. I won't be melting. And Jack, I'm thinking it's probably still going to be hot in Texas. So you guys take care, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.